Your Reminders app is coming along quite nicely. You can save reminders and you can mark them as complete. But like in the last video, there's another big limitation with the app. All reminders are added to a single list. In Apple's Reminders app, you can create multiple lists, each with its own set of reminders. Let's do the same. We're going to navigate to the Data Model Editor. And in here, you're going to add another entity to model a list. Tap on Add Entity to add another one. And in the inspector, let's change the name to Reminder List. Ideally, you would name this just List, but there's already a list type in SwiftUI, and you will get conflicts. A reminder list is going to have a single attribute, a title of type string that is non-optional. Now you might be thinking, don't you need an attribute to model your reminders? When using Core Data, if you want to represent a connection between two different entities, you define a relationship instead. Right under the Attributes section, you should see a section named Relationships. Tap on the plus button to add a new one. Like Core Data attributes, you need to configure different aspects of your relationships, and you start with a name. Give this relationship the name Reminders. Next up is the destination of this relationship. If you think of the reminder list entity as the source of the relationship, the destination is the entity that you're creating a relationship with. In this case, that is the reminder entity. Let's leave the inverse column empty for now. Next, you're going to move to the Data Model Inspector, where you can customize this relationship further. Make sure you select it first. There you go. First up, should this relationship be optional? That is, should every list have a reminder? I don't think it needs to. You can have an empty list, like when you first create it, or when you finish all the reminders in the list. So let's leave this as optional. Now you've already specified the destination property, and you're going to skip the next two for now. The last attribute here is what type of relationship this is. Is this a to-one relationship? That is, can one reminder list only have one reminder? Or is it a to-many, where one reminder list can have more than one reminder? Well, it's definitely the latter, so let's change that to too-many. You'll notice, when you do that, additional options appear in the inspector. You can specify if this relationship is ordered, and whether you can have a minimum or maximum number of reminders stored in a list. So let's go ahead and mark this as ordered. Doing so affects the underlying type when the relationship is defined in code. Instead of a set, you end up using an ordered set, which is an Objective-C type available in the Foundation library. Sweet. Now let's switch over to the reminder entity. When defining relationships, Core Data recommends that you define the relationships in both directions. We just defined a relationship going from reminder list to reminder, so let's add the inverse, from the perspective of a reminder. So in the reminder entity, tap on the plus button in the relationship section to add a new relationship. You're going to name this one List, since the inverse is that every reminder should belong to a reminder list. The destination for this relationship is Reminder List, and this time around you can specify the relationship you defined earlier as the inverse. So from the drop-down, select Reminders. Switch over to the Data Model Inspector again. Now, unlike the previous relationship you defined, in this case, every reminder should be associated with a reminder list. You don't want to have these standalone reminders that you can add outside of lists, so uncheck the optional box. That's the only change you're going to make here because the rest of the defaults are what you want. A reminder can only belong to one list, so this is a to-one relationship. That should be all you need to model. If you switch back over to the reminder list, you can now see that the inverse property on the relationship has been updated to reflect the one you just defined. Okay, now that you have an entity, like last time, you need to model it in code. But unlike the last time, we're going to let Core Data handle this for you. We'll still modify it a bit, but at least we get to go through the process. So navigate to the Editor menu, and then select Create NS Manage Object subclass. On the modal that appears, select the Reminders model, and this represents the entire data model, and hit Next. On this subsequent modal, you're going to select just the Reminder List entity. Note that Reminder has not been selected for you because you let Xcode know already that you were manually generating the code yourself. So we'll hit Next again, and you're going to make sure that you add it to both the model folder inside our directory and the group in Xcode. All right, and then we'll hit Create. Like the pattern you followed earlier, you'll see that two files get added to the model group: Reminder List plus Core Data class, which contains the simple class definition, and Reminder List plus Core Data properties, with all the extra stuff that you need to use the class. Now you'll see that there's a lot more going on in this file than you added to the Reminder extension earlier. For starters, you have a basic fetch request defined right over here. There's nothing different here compared to the one you wrote, except for the fact that this function is annotated with @non-Objective-C. Now, if you haven't used this keyword before, it's essentially the opposite of @Objective-C, and this hides the Swift declaration from Objective-C code. So generic fetch requests are a very Swift thing, and by default, Core Data doesn't expose this method to Objective-C code. You'll also notice that title is marked as optional, even though you specifically said it shouldn't be optional. That's just the Core Data quirk we talked about earlier. Core Data optionals are not necessarily the same as Swift optionals. Now, right below that is the property that was generated for the reminders relationship. Notice that the type of this set is NS-ordered set, which is an Objective-C type. NS-ordered set is not generic, and if you were to iterate over this, the resulting values would be of type AnyObject, which is not at all convenient. But you can change this to a non-optional array containing reminders. Let's do that. You won't be using any of these accessor methods either, so you can go ahead and get rid of it. Now again, if you try and build here, it will automatically and immediately fail, and that's because you modified the generated code without switching the code gen to manual none. So let's go ahead and do that again. So we'll go back to the data model, select the new entity, go to the data model inspector, and then under code gen, we'll change it from class definition to manual none. Let's build and run to make sure everything works okay, but like last time, you might have to do a Command-Shift-K to clean out your build folder, and then a Command-B to get it running again. Okay, next, let's navigate back to Reminder List plus Core Data properties, and we'll define a method to easily create a reminder list. Let's build and run one more time to make sure it works. Okay, and now, just like reminders, you can also create and save reminder lists very easily. One more thing before you take a break. If you navigate back to the data model, so that's the reminders.exe data model file, all this time you've been working in the table editor style. As your object graph grows larger, it often helps to look at it in the graph style editor. So on the bottom right, all the way in the corner, click on the very last button to change to the graph style editor. And now you should see your object graph along with the relationships between them. So this is the reminder entity, and here we have an arrow going out with a single arrow mark at the end, indicating this is a to-one relationship with a reminder list. And in the opposite direction, we have a to-many. Build and run, make sure everything works, and let's take a quick break here if it does. In the next video, you'll incorporate reminder lists into the app.